Master your emotions, and you will master your life. Introduction.
Hi, this is Dr. Julian Vance. In a world that praises intellect and speed, we often forget the quiet strength of emotional mastery. Intelligence alone can build systems, but emotional intelligence builds legacies. This book is not about suppressing your feelings. It's about understanding them so deeply that they no longer control you, they serve you. Dr. Julian Vance invites you on a journey into the mind's emotional core. You'll learn how to stay calm in chaos, how to turn inner conflict into clarity, and how to lead with empathy without losing strength. This is not theory, it's a practical guide to mastering the invisible forces that shape every decision, every connection, and every step forward. This book doesn't just change how you feel. It changes who you become. Chapter 1: The Hidden Power of Self-Awareness. The foundation of all leadership. Sarah sat in her corner office, staring at the email that had just landed in her inbox. Her team's quarterly project had been rejected by the board, and months of work would need to be completely restructured. She felt her chest tighten, her jaw clench, and a familiar heat rising in her cheeks. In that moment, Sarah faced a choice that would define not only her next action, but potentially her entire career trajectory. She could storm into the conference room and demand explanations, letting her frustration fuel a confrontation that would leave relationships damaged and trust eroded. Or she could pause, breathe, and recognize what was happening inside her emotional landscape before deciding how to respond. This moment of choice, this split second between feeling and reacting, is where emotional intelligence begins. It's the space where self-awareness transforms from an abstract concept into a practical superpower that shapes every interaction, decision, and outcome in our lives. Before we can effectively lead others, influence outcomes, or navigate the complex social dynamics of our personal and professional lives, we must first learn to lead ourselves. This requires developing what psychologist Daniel Goleman identified as the cornerstone of emotional intelligence: self-awareness. Self-awareness is not simply knowing your strengths and weaknesses, or being able to recite your personality type from the latest assessment you've taken. True self-awareness is the ongoing, moment-by-moment understanding of your emotional experience as it unfolds, without judgment, without immediate reaction, and with a deep curiosity about what your emotions are trying to tell you. The neuroscience of emotional self-awareness. To understand why self-awareness is so powerful, we need to take a brief journey into the architecture of our brains. When we experience an emotion, it begins in the limbic system, particularly in a small, almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. This ancient part of our brain is designed for survival, constantly scanning our environment for threats and opportunities. The amygdala can trigger a response in as little as 12 milliseconds, far faster than our conscious, rational mind can process information. This is why you might find yourself snapping at a colleague before you've even fully processed what they said, or why your heart starts racing before you consciously realize you're nervous about an upcoming presentation. The prefrontal cortex, located just behind your forehead, is where rational thought, planning, and emotional regulation occur. This is your brain's CEO, capable of sophisticated analysis and thoughtful response. However, the prefrontal cortex is much slower than the amygdala, often taking several seconds to fully engage with and process emotional information. Self-awareness creates a bridge between these two systems. When you develop the skill of emotional awareness, you're essentially training your prefrontal cortex to recognize and work with the rapid-fire signals from your limbic system, rather than being hijacked by them. This isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending they don't exist. Emotions carry vital information about our needs, values, and the situations we find ourselves in. The goal is to receive this information clearly and use it wisely, rather than being unconsciously driven by it. The anatomy of an emotion. Most people experience emotions as monolithic events: I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm excited. But emotions are actually complex, multi-layered experiences that unfold over time and contain rich information if we know how to decode them. Every emotion has several components. The physical sensation. Before you can name an emotion, you feel it in your body. Anger might show up as tension in your shoulders and jaw, a clenched stomach, or heat in your chest. Anxiety often manifests as a fluttering sensation in your chest, shallow breathing, or restless energy in your limbs. Joy might feel like lightness in your chest, relaxed facial muscles, or an expansive feeling throughout your torso. The mental story, alongside the physical sensation, your mind immediately begins constructing a narrative about what's happening. This person doesn't respect me, I'm going to fail at this presentation, or this is the best day ever. These stories feel true and immediate, but they're often incomplete or distorted interpretations of the situation. The action impulse. Every emotion comes with a built-in suggestion for action. Anger urges us to fight or confront. Fear suggests we flee or hide. Sadness encourages us to withdraw and seek comfort. Joy motivates us to share and connect. These impulses served our ancestors well in simpler environments, but they don't always serve us well in complex modern situations. The values signal. Perhaps most importantly, emotions carry information about what matters to us. Anger often signals that a boundary has been crossed or a value has been violated. Sadness might indicate that we've lost something important to us. Excitement suggests we're moving towards something we value. Fear can indicate that something we care about feels threatened. Self-awareness involves learning to recognize and distinguish between these different components of emotional experience. When Sarah felt that familiar heat rising in response to the rejected project, self-awareness would help her notice the physical sensation, examine the story her mind was telling. They don't value our work, recognize the action impulse, to confront and demand explanations, and identify the underlying values at stake, perhaps recognition, fairness, or the well-being of her team. The self-awareness paradox. One of the most counterintuitive aspects of developing self-awareness is that the harder you try to control or analyze your emotions, the more elusive they become. Emotions are not problems to be solved or enemies to be defeated, they're sources of information to be understood and integrated. This creates what we might call the self-awareness paradox. The more you can accept and observe your emotions without judgment, the more choice you have in how you respond to them. The more you fight against or try to immediately fix your emotional experience, the more likely you are to be unconsciously driven by it. Consider Marcus, a senior manager who prided himself on being rational and level-headed. Whenever he felt frustrated or angry, he would immediately try to talk himself out of it, telling himself he was being too emotional and needed to focus on the facts. But this approach often backfired. Because he never fully acknowledged or understood his emotional experience, his frustration would leak out in passive-aggressive comments, impatient body language, and a generally tense atmosphere that affected his entire team. When Marcus learned to pause and simply notice his frustration, "I'm feeling really frustrated right now. My chest is tight, my thoughts are spinning, and I have an urge to just shut down this conversation," something shifted. By accepting the emotion rather than fighting it, he created space for it to move through him naturally. He could then ask himself what the frustration was telling him about the situation and choose his response more consciously. Emotional granularity, the art of precise feeling. Most people have a relatively limited emotional vocabulary. We tend to use broad categories like good, bad, stressed, fine, or angry to describe complex inner experiences. But research by psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett has shown that people who can distinguish between subtly different emotions, what she calls emotional granularity, have better mental health, stronger relationships, and more effective coping strategies. Instead of simply feeling bad, a person with high emotional granularity might distinguish between feeling disappointed, frustrated, overwhelmed, worried, or resentful. Each of these emotions carries different information and suggests different responses. Disappointment might indicate that an expectation wasn't met, suggesting a need to either adjust expectations or have a conversation about what went wrong. Frustration often signals that progress is being blocked, pointing toward a need to problem solve or find alternative approaches. Overwhelm suggests that there's too much happening at once, indicating a need to prioritize or ask for support. Worry points to uncertainty about future outcomes, suggesting a need for more information or preparation. Building emotional granularity is like developing a more sophisticated palette as an artist. The more colors you can distinguish and name, the more precisely you can create the painting you want. The more emotions you can recognize and understand, the more skillfully you can navigate the complex landscape of human experience. The body's wisdom, physical awareness as emotional intelligence. Your body is constantly generating information about your emotional state, but most of us have learned to ignore or override these signals. We sit hunched over computers despite back pain, push through exhaustion instead of resting, and ignore the knot in our stomach that tells us something isn't right about a particular situation. Developing self-awareness means reconnecting with your body's wisdom and learning to interpret its signals. Your body often knows things before your conscious mind catches up. That slight tension in your shoulders during a seemingly pleasant conversation might be picking up on subtle signs of insincerity or manipulation. The way your energy drops when you walk into a particular environment might be telling you something important about whether that space truly supports your well-being. The lightness you feel in your chest when talking with a certain person might be signaling that this relationship brings out the best in you. Learning to read these bodily signals requires practice and attention. Throughout your day, try checking in with your physical experience. Where do you hold tension? When does your breathing become shallow? When do you feel most expansive and relaxed? What physical sensations accompany different emotional states? This isn't about becoming hypervigilant or obsessively monitoring every sensation. It's about developing a friendly, curious relationship with your body's feedback system. Think of it as having an incredibly sophisticated internal guidance system that's constantly providing you with data about your environment, your relationships, and your choices. The stories we tell ourselves. While our bodies provide immediate, often accurate information about our emotional state, our minds are constantly constructing narratives about what our emotions mean. These mental stories can be incredibly helpful, but they can also be misleading or limiting. When James felt anxious before a big presentation, his mind immediately generated the story, "I'm going to embarrass myself. Everyone will see that I don't know what I'm talking about. My career will be ruined." This story felt absolutely true and compelling, but it was actually a collection of assumptions, predictions, and interpretations that may or may not have been accurate. Self-awareness involves learning to distinguish between the raw data of emotional experience and the stories we construct around that data. James could learn to notice, "I'm feeling anxious. My heart is beating faster, my palms are sweaty, and there's a fluttery feeling in my stomach. My mind is telling me a story about failure and embarrassment, but that's just one possible interpretation of this situation." This distinction is crucial because we can often change our relationship to a situation by examining and questioning the stories we tell ourselves about it. James's anxiety might actually be a sign that the presentation is important to him and that he cares about doing well, information he could use to motivate thorough preparation rather than evidence that he's doomed to fail. The most self-aware people are skilled at holding their mental narratives lightly, recognizing them as interpretations rather than absolute truths. They can ask themselves questions like, what other ways could I interpret this situation? What story would someone who cares about me tell about what's happening? What would I tell a friend who was experiencing this same situation? Tracking your emotional patterns. One of the most powerful ways to develop self-awareness is to begin tracking your emotional patterns over time. Most of us experience emotions in the moment and then move on, rarely taking the time to notice larger patterns or themes in our emotional lives. But emotions are not random events. They respond to specific triggers, follow predictable patterns, and provide consistent information about our needs and values. By paying attention to these patterns, we can begin to anticipate and prepare for emotional challenges, recognize what environments and relationships support our well-being, and make choices that align with our deeper needs. Consider keeping an emotion log for a week or two. Several times throughout each day, simply note what you're feeling, what might have triggered that emotion, how it showed up in your body, and what story your mind told about the situation. Don't try to fix or change anything, just observe and record. After a week, look for patterns. Do you tend to feel anxious at certain times of day? Does your energy consistently drop after interactions with particular people? Do you feel most creative and engaged when working on specific types of tasks? Are there environments where you consistently feel calm and focused? These patterns contain valuable information about how to structure your life, relationships, and work in ways that support your well-being and effectiveness. They also help you recognize when emotional reactions are about current situations versus old patterns that may no longer serve you. The inner compass, values and emotional guidance. At the deepest level, emotions are messages from our value system. They tell us what matters to us, what we need, and how well our current situation aligns with our deeper priorities. Learning to read these messages is like developing an internal compass that can guide you toward a more authentic and fulfilling life. When you feel energized and excited, you're usually moving towards something that aligns with your values. When you feel drained or resentful, you're often moving away from what matters to you or compromising something important. When you feel angry, you're typically encountering a situation where your boundaries or values are being violated. When you feel sad, you're often grieving the loss of something you value. This doesn't mean you should make every decision based on immediate emotional impulses. Emotions provide data, not commands. But learning to interpret this emotional data can help you make choices that are more aligned with who you really are and what you truly want. Rebecca, a successful lawyer, spent years ignoring a persistent sense of dissatisfaction in her work. She told herself she should be grateful for her high salary and prestigious position. But when she finally began paying attention to her emotional experience, she noticed that she felt most energized and engaged when mentoring junior colleagues and most drained when working on complex financial transactions. This emotional information pointed toward values around teaching, development, and human connection that weren't being fulfilled in her current role. Rather than immediately quitting her job, Rebecca began looking for ways to incorporate more mentoring and teaching into her work. Eventually, she transitioned into a role training new lawyers, a change that honored both her practical needs and her deeper values. The ripple effect: how self-awareness impacts everything. Developing self-awareness doesn't just change your internal experience, it transforms every aspect of how you show up in the world. When you understand your own emotional patterns and triggers, you become less reactive and more responsive. When you can recognize your emotions without being hijacked by them, you create space for wisdom and choice. This has profound implications for leadership, relationships, decision-making, and overall life satisfaction. Leaders with high self-awareness create psychologically safe environments where others can be authentic and innovative. They make decisions based on a full range of information, including emotional and intuitive data. They're able to regulate their own emotional state, which helps others feel calm and confident. In relationships, self-awareness allows you to take ownership of your emotional experience rather than making others responsible for how you feel. You can communicate your needs clearly, recognize when you're projecting old patterns onto current situations, and respond to conflict from a place of clarity rather than reactivity. In decision-making, self-awareness helps you integrate rational analysis with emotional and intuitive wisdom. You can recognize when fear is holding you back from necessary risks or when excitement is leading you toward choices that aren't in your best interest. The practice of present moment awareness. Self-awareness is not a destination but a practice, a moment-by-moment choice to pay attention to your inner experience with curiosity and compassion. It's developed through small, consistent acts of attention throughout your day. You might pause before entering a meeting and notice what you're feeling. You could check in with your body periodically throughout the day, noticing where you hold tension or where you feel relaxed. You might take 3 conscious breaths when you notice yourself becoming reactive, creating space between stimulus and response. The goal is not to become hypervigilant about your emotions or to analyze every feeling. It's to develop a friendly, curious relationship with your inner experience, to become interested in what's happening inside you without immediately trying to change or fix it. This practice is like developing a muscle. The more you exercise your awareness, the stronger and more reliable it becomes. Over time, what once required conscious effort becomes more automatic. You begin to notice emotional shifts as they happen rather than only after you've already reacted. You become more attuned to the subtle signals that indicate when you're moving toward or away from alignment with your values. Beyond the individual, self-awareness in relationship. While self-awareness begins with understanding your own inner experience, it ultimately extends into how you relate to others. When you understand your own emotional patterns, triggers, and needs, you become more curious about others' inner experiences. You're less likely to take others' behavior personally and more likely to respond with empathy and understanding. You also become more authentic in your relationships. Instead of unconsciously playing roles or trying to manage others' perceptions of you, you can show up as you really are, with your full range of emotions, needs, and experiences. This authenticity invites others to be authentic as well, creating deeper, more meaningful connections. Self-awareness also helps you recognize when your emotional reactions are about the present situation versus old patterns from past relationships. You can ask yourself, is my strong reaction to this person's behavior really about them, or is it reminding me of something from my past? What part of this is about now, and what part is about then? This capacity to distinguish between past and present, self and other, internal experience and external reality is the foundation of emotional maturity and healthy relationships. The journey continues. Developing self-awareness is not a linear process with a clear endpoint. It's an ongoing journey of discovery, a deepening relationship with the full spectrum of human experience. There will be times when you feel incredibly aware and centered, and times when you're completely hijacked by emotions you didn't see coming. Both experiences are part of the path. The invitation is to approach this journey with patience, curiosity, and self-compassion. You're not trying to become perfect or to eliminate difficult emotions from your life. You're learning to dance with whatever arises, to find wisdom in both your struggles and your successes, and to use your emotional experience as a guide toward a more authentic, fulfilling, and connected life. As you continue to develop this fundamental skill of emotional intelligence, remember that self-awareness is not selfish or self-indulgent. It's one of the greatest gifts you can offer to the people in your life. When you know yourself deeply and can manage your own emotional experience skillfully, you create space for others to be seen, heard, and valued for who they truly are. The hidden power of self-awareness lies not in controlling your emotions, but in understanding them so deeply that they become allies rather than obstacles in creating the life and relationships you truly want. In that understanding, you find not only calm, control, and confidence, but also the capacity to contribute meaningfully to the well-being of others and the world around you. Your journey toward greater self-awareness begins with a single moment of attention, a brief pause to notice what's happening inside you right now. In that pause lies infinite possibility, the possibility to respond rather than react, to choose rather than be driven, and to lead yourself and others from a place of wisdom, authenticity, and deep understanding. The power has always been within you. Self-awareness simply helps you remember how to access it. Chapter 2: Mastering Emotional Discipline. Emotions are not meant to be suppressed, they're meant to be trained. Introduction: The power of emotional training. Picture this: you're in a heated meeting where a colleague publicly challenges your ideas. Your heart races, your face flushes, and every instinct screams at you to defend yourself with sharp words. But instead of reacting, you pause. You breathe. You choose your response. This isn't suppression, this is mastery. Most people live at the mercy of their emotions, bouncing from one emotional state to another like a pinball. They mistake suppression for control, building internal pressure until they explode. But there's a third way, a path that acknowledges emotions as powerful allies while maintaining conscious choice over how we express them. This chapter will transform how you think about emotions. You'll discover that emotional discipline isn't about becoming robotic or disconnected. It's about becoming the conductor of your own emotional orchestra, able to create harmony even in the midst of chaos. The myth of emotional suppression. Let's start by destroying a dangerous myth, that controlling emotions means burying them. Suppression is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The harder you push, the more explosive the eventual release becomes. When we suppress emotions, we don't eliminate them, we store them, and stored emotions have a way of showing up at the worst possible moments. Sarah, a marketing executive, learned this the hard way. For months, she swallowed her frustration with her micromanaging boss, telling herself to stay professional. But emotions don't simply disappear because we ignore them. They accumulate like pressure in a steam engine. One day, during a routine team meeting, her boss made a minor comment about a project timeline, and Sarah exploded. 6 months of suppressed frustration came pouring out in a 3-minute tirade that damaged her reputation and her relationship with her team. This is the suppression trap. When we push emotions down, we lose access to their valuable information while still carrying their energetic charge. Emotions exist for a reason. They're sophisticated internal guidance systems that have evolved over millions of years to help us navigate complex social and environmental challenges. Fear alerts us to potential dangers. Anger signals that our boundaries have been crossed. Sadness helps us process loss and change. Joy reinforces behaviors and experiences that serve our well-being. When we suppress these signals, we're essentially flying blind through life's challenges. Understanding emotional training. Emotional training is fundamentally different from suppression. It's the process of developing conscious awareness of your emotional states and learning to channel their energy constructively. Think of it like physical training. You don't suppress your muscles, you strengthen them, coordinate them, and direct their power towards specific goals. The foundation of emotional training rests on 3 core principles. First, recognition without judgment. This means learning to observe your emotions as they arise without immediately labeling them as good or bad. Emotions simply are their information, energy, and natural responses to your environment. When you judge emotions, you create internal conflict that clouds your ability to work with them effectively. Second, understanding the message. Every emotion carries information. Anxiety might be telling you to prepare more thoroughly. Frustration might indicate that you're not aligned with your values. Excitement might signal an opportunity worth pursuing. Training yourself to decode these messages transforms emotions from disruptive forces into valuable advisors. Third, conscious response over automatic reaction. This is where the real power lies. Between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space lies your freedom to choose. Emotional training expands that space, giving you more time and clarity to select responses that serve your highest interests. The neuroscience of emotional choice. Understanding what happens in your brain during emotional experiences gives you tremendous power over them. When you encounter an emotionally charged situation, your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, fires first. This triggers the release of stress hormones and prepares your body for fight, flight, or freeze responses. This entire process happens in milliseconds, before your conscious mind even knows what's happening. But here's the crucial insight. There's a brief window, researchers call it the emotional hijack period, during which your prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, can regain control. This window typically lasts 6 to 8 seconds. If you can navigate these critical seconds without being swept away by the emotional tide, you can access your full range of response options. This is why the pause is so powerful. When you feel a strong emotion rising, count to 8. Breathe deeply. Feel your feet on the ground. This simple practice creates neurological space between the emotional trigger and your response, allowing your prefrontal cortex to come online and participate in the decision-making process. Marcus, an emergency room doctor, uses this technique dozens of times per shift. When faced with panicked family members, frustrated patients, or high-pressure medical decisions, he's trained himself to find that 8-second window. I tell myself, feel the feeling, find the message, choose the response, he explains. It's become so automatic that I can do it even in life or death situations. Daily practices for emotional training. Mastering emotional discipline requires consistent practice, just like developing physical fitness. Here are the core daily practices that will strengthen your emotional resilience and expand your capacity for conscious choice. Morning emotional check-in. Start each day by taking your emotional temperature. Before checking your phone or diving into your to-do list, spend 2 minutes asking yourself, how am I feeling right now? What emotions are present? What might they be telling me about my needs, boundaries, or priorities for the day? This isn't about changing or fixing anything, it's about developing emotional awareness. You might notice anxiety about a presentation, excitement about a creative project, or residual frustration from yesterday's traffic jam. Simply acknowledge what's there without judgment. Keep an emotional journal for 1 week, noting your morning emotional check-in. You'll start to see patterns, certain emotions that show up regularly, emotional states that correlate with better or worse days, and situations that consistently trigger specific responses. The STOP technique. STOP is an acronym for a powerful 4-step process you can use in any emotionally charged moment. S. Stop what you're doing. Don't send that email, make that comment, or take that action. Create a pause. T. Take a breath. Deep, slow breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system and creates space for conscious choice. Breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 6. O. Observe what's happening internally. What emotions are present? What physical sensations do you notice? What thoughts are running through your mind? Observe without trying to change anything. P. Proceed with intention. Now that you've created space and awareness, what response serves your highest good? What action aligns with your values and long-term goals? Practice STOP with minor irritations first: slow internet, long lines, small disappointments. As you build this neural pathway, you'll find it available to you in more challenging situations. Emotional reframing. This practice involves consciously shifting your perspective on emotional experiences. Instead of viewing difficult emotions as problems to solve, train yourself to see them as information to gather. When you feel anger, ask, what boundary of mine has been crossed? What do I need to communicate or protect? When you experience fear, explore, what am I trying to preserve or protect? What preparation might serve me? When sadness arises, inquire, what loss am I processing? What do I need for healing? Jennifer, a project manager, transformed her relationship with workplace stress using this technique. Instead of seeing her anxiety before big presentations as a weakness, she learned to interpret it as her system's way of ensuring thorough preparation. My anxiety became my preparation alarm, she says. Instead of fighting it, I use it as fuel for getting ready. The emotional weather report. Think of emotions like weather. They're temporary conditions that pass through your internal landscape. This practice involves observing your emotions with the detached curiosity of a meteorologist. Throughout the day, give yourself brief emotional weather reports: partly cloudy with patches of anxiety about the deadline, sunny with occasional gusts of excitement about the new project, stormy with heavy feelings of disappointment, clearing by evening. This practice creates psychological distance from intense emotions while maintaining awareness of them. You're not your emotions any more than you are the weather outside. You're the observer, the one who experiences them but isn't defined by them. Building resilience under pressure. True emotional discipline reveals itself under pressure. Anyone can stay calm in perfect conditions, but mastery means maintaining your center when the stakes are high and the pressure is intense. Pressure inoculation training. Athletes and military personnel use a technique called pressure inoculation training, deliberately practicing skills under stressful conditions so they become automatic when real pressure hits. You can apply this same principle to emotional discipline. Start by identifying situations that typically trigger strong emotional responses for you. Maybe it's public speaking, difficult conversations, or tight deadlines. Then, create controlled opportunities to practice your emotional discipline skills in these scenarios. If public speaking triggers anxiety, volunteer for small presentation opportunities. If confrontation makes you reactive, practice difficult conversations with trusted friends. If time pressure makes you frantic, deliberately work on projects with artificial deadlines. Each time you practice conscious emotional choice under pressure, you're building neural pathways that will serve you when the stakes are real. The anchor technique. Develop a physical anchor that helps you return to emotional equilibrium quickly. This might be pressing your thumb and forefinger together, placing your hand on your heart, or feeling your feet firmly on the ground. Practice this anchor during calm moments, associating it with feelings of centeredness and clarity. Then use it during challenging situations to quickly access that centered state. The key is consistent practice. The more you pair the physical anchor with emotional stability, the more reliable it becomes as a tool for self-regulation. David, a trial lawyer, uses a subtle ankle movement as his anchor. During tense courtroom moments, he presses his foot firmly against the floor, instantly accessing the calm confidence he's cultivated through practice. It's like having a reset button, he explains. One small movement, and I'm back in control. Choosing response over reaction. The ultimate goal of emotional discipline is expanding your response repertoire. Most people have very limited emotional responses. They react the same way to similar triggers, creating predictable patterns that don't serve them well. The response menu. Create a mental menu of possible responses to common emotional triggers. When someone cuts you off in traffic, your options might include taking a deep breath and letting it go, using it as a reminder to stay present, or viewing it as an opportunity to practice patience. When criticized at work, you might choose to listen for valid feedback, ask clarifying questions, express appreciation for the perspective, or request time to process before responding. The key is developing this menu before you need it. In the heat of an emotional moment, it's hard to think creatively about response options. But if you've already considered various approaches, you can quickly select the one that best serves the situation. Values-based responding. Let your core values guide your emotional responses. When you feel triggered, ask yourself, what response would align with my values? If I were operating from my highest self, how would I handle this situation? This approach transforms emotional challenges into opportunities to live your values more fully. Instead of being reactive victims of circumstance, you become conscious creators of your experience. Maria, a team leader, uses this approach with difficult team members. When faced with someone's negative attitude or poor performance, she asks herself, how can I respond in a way that reflects my values of respect, growth, and accountability? This question consistently leads her to responses that serve both the individual and the team. Advanced emotional discipline techniques. As your emotional discipline develops, you can begin working with more sophisticated techniques that further expand your emotional intelligence and resilience. Emotional Aikido. Aikido is a martial art that uses an opponent's energy and momentum against them rather than meeting force with force. You can apply this same principle to emotional situations. When someone directs anger toward you, instead of defending or counterattacking, you can redirect that energy. Acknowledge their frustration, ask what they need, or find common ground. When faced with criticism, instead of becoming defensive, you can thank them for their perspective and ask for specific suggestions. This approach often diffuses conflict while maintaining your emotional equilibrium. You're not suppressing your emotions or allowing yourself to be walked on, you're skillfully redirecting the situation's energy toward a more constructive outcome. Emotional titration. This technique involves gradually exposing yourself to increasingly challenging emotional situations, building your capacity slowly and safely. Like gradually increasing weights in physical training, emotional titration helps you develop strength without overwhelming your system. Start with minor irritations and practice your emotional discipline skills. As you become more comfortable, gradually work with more challenging situations. This progressive approach builds genuine confidence and competence. The observer self. Develop the part of you that can observe your emotions without being consumed by them. This observer self is always present, it's the awareness behind your thoughts and feelings. Strengthening this capacity gives you tremendous freedom from automatic emotional reactions. Practice meditation, mindfulness, or any activity that cultivates present moment awareness. The stronger your observer self, the less likely you are to be swept away by emotional storms. Integrating emotional discipline into daily life. The true test of emotional discipline isn't in perfect moments, it's in the messy, unpredictable flow of daily life. Here's how to integrate these practices seamlessly into your routine. Micro-practices. Use transition moments throughout your day for brief emotional discipline practices. Before entering a meeting, take 3 conscious breaths. While waiting in line, practice observing your emotions without judgment. During your commute, set intentions for how you want to show up emotionally. These micro-practices compound over time, creating a foundation of emotional awareness and choice that supports you in bigger challenges. Emotional recovery protocols. Develop specific protocols for recovering from emotional overwhelm. Maybe it's a 5-minute walk, listening to a particular song, or calling a trusted friend. Having a clear recovery plan prevents one emotional challenge from derailing your entire day. Emotional fitness routines. Just as you might have a physical fitness routine, create an emotional fitness routine. This might include daily journaling, weekly emotional check-ins with yourself, monthly reflection on your emotional patterns, or quarterly goal setting around emotional development. The ripple effects of emotional mastery. When you master emotional discipline, the benefits extend far beyond your personal well-being. Your improved emotional regulation positively impacts every relationship and situation you encounter. Leadership through emotional example. Others unconsciously mirror your emotional state. When you remain centered under pressure, you give others permission to do the same. When you respond thoughtfully rather than reactively, you elevate the quality of every interaction. Sarah, the marketing executive from our earlier example, eventually learned these skills after her emotional explosion. Within 6 months of implementing daily emotional discipline practices, her team members began commenting on the positive change in team dynamics. "It's like the whole department became calmer," one colleague observed. When Sarah stopped reacting to every crisis, we all did. Enhanced decision-making. Emotional discipline dramatically improves your decision-making abilities. When you're not clouded by reactive emotions, you can see situations more clearly and consider a broader range of options. You make choices based on your values and long-term goals rather than temporary emotional states. Deeper relationships. People feel safer and more connected with emotionally disciplined individuals. When others know you won't react unpredictably or take things personally, they're more likely to be honest, vulnerable, and collaborative with you. Conclusion: the path forward. Mastering emotional discipline is not about perfection, it's about progress. Every time you choose response over reaction, every moment you pause instead of immediately acting, every instance where you find the message in an emotion, you're building the neural pathways of emotional mastery. Start small. Choose one practice from this chapter and commit to it for 2 weeks. Notice what changes in your experience, your relationships, and your sense of personal power. Then gradually add other techniques, building your emotional discipline the same way you would build physical strength, consistently, progressively, and with patience for the process. Remember that emotions are not the enemy. They're sophisticated guidance systems that, when properly trained, become your allies in creating a life of clarity, resilience, and authentic power. The goal isn't to eliminate emotional responses but to expand your capacity for conscious choice in how you work with them. Your emotions are a river of energy flowing through your life. You can choose to be swept away by their current, or you can learn to navigate their waters with skill and intention. The choice, as always, is yours. And with each conscious choice you make, you become more of who you truly are, not a victim of circumstance, but a creator of your experience. The journey of emotional discipline is lifelong, but every step along the path increases your freedom, your effectiveness, and your ability to show up as your best self in every situation life presents. Begin today, begin now, and trust in your capacity to grow into the emotionally disciplined person you're meant to become. Chapter 3: Emotional Intelligence in Relationships. Empathy is a superpower. Welcome to what I consider the most transformative chapter in our journey through emotional intelligence. Today we're exploring how emotional intelligence becomes your secret weapon in every relationship you have, whether that's with your partner, your colleagues, your children, or even strangers you meet. The foundation: understanding empathy as your superpower. Let me start with a story. Sarah, a team leader at a tech company, noticed her usually energetic colleague Mark seemed withdrawn during their weekly meeting. Instead of ignoring it or assuming he was just having an off day, Sarah's emotional intelligence kicked in. She recognized the subtle signs: the way Mark's shoulders slumped, how he avoided eye contact, the slight tension in his voice when he spoke. After the meeting, Sarah approached Mark privately. "I noticed you seemed a bit different today. Is everything okay?" That simple act of recognition and care led to Mark opening up about his father's recent diagnosis. Sarah didn't try to fix the problem or offer empty reassurances. She listened, acknowledged his feelings, and offered practical support by adjusting his workload for the week. This is empathy in action, and it truly is a superpower. But empathy isn't just about being nice or caring. It's about developing the ability to accurately read emotional signals, understand what others are experiencing, and respond in ways that build connection and trust. Reading emotional signals, the hidden language of feelings. Every day, we're surrounded by emotional information that most people miss entirely. Think of emotional signals as a hidden language that's constantly being spoken around you. The person who crosses their arms during a presentation isn't necessarily cold, they might be feeling defensive or uncertain. The colleague who suddenly becomes overly formal in emails might be feeling excluded or undervalued. Learning to read these signals starts with paying attention to 3 key areas. First, facial expressions and microexpressions. These fleeting facial movements often reveal true feelings before conscious thought can mask them. A genuine smile engages both the mouth and the eyes, creating those small crinkles we call crow's feet. A forced smile only moves the mouth muscles. Second, body language and posture. When someone leans in during conversation, they're showing engagement and interest. When they create physical barriers, like placing objects between themselves and others, they might be feeling defensive or wanting to create distance. Third, vocal cues and tone. It's not just what people say, but how they say it. The pace of speech, volume changes, and vocal tension all carry emotional information. Someone speaking unusually fast might be anxious or excited. A colleague whose voice becomes flat and monotone might be withdrawing emotionally. The art of speaking with intention. Now that we can read emotional signals, let's talk about how to respond with intention. This is where many people stumble. They might recognize that someone is upset, but then they respond in ways that actually make things worse. Speaking with intention means choosing your words and tone based on what the other person needs in that moment, not just what you want to say. It's the difference between saying "you shouldn't feel that way" versus "I can see this is really important to you. Help me understand." One powerful technique is emotional labeling. When you accurately identify and acknowledge someone's emotions, you validate their experience and often help them process their feelings more effectively. Instead of saying "calm down," try "I can see you're frustrated about this situation." Another crucial skill is matching emotional energy appropriately. If someone comes to you excited about a promotion, matching their enthusiasm builds connection. If they're sharing something difficult, a more measured, compassionate tone shows you understand the gravity of their situation. Navigating difficult conversations. Let's be honest, difficult conversations are where relationships are made or broken. This is where your emotional intelligence becomes absolutely critical. The goal isn't to avoid conflict, but to navigate it in ways that strengthen rather than damage relationships. Before entering any difficult conversation, take a moment to check your own emotional state. Are you angry? Defensive? Hurt? These emotions will influence everything you say and do. If you're not in a good emotional place, it's often better to wait until you can approach the conversation more calmly. During the conversation, remember that most people aren't trying to be difficult, they're trying to be understood. Often, what appears to be stubbornness or resistance is actually fear, confusion, or feeling unheard. Your job is to get beneath the surface behavior to understand the underlying emotions and needs. Use phrases that create psychological safety. "I'm curious about your perspective, help me understand where you're coming from," or "what would need to happen for this to work for both of us." These phrases invite collaboration rather than triggering defensiveness. Building deeper connections. Emotional intelligence allows you to move beyond surface-level interactions to create genuine connections with others. This happens when people feel truly seen and understood by you, not just heard, but genuinely understood. One way to build deeper connections is through vulnerability. This doesn't mean oversharing or making others uncomfortable. It means being authentic about your own experiences and emotions when appropriate. When you share something real about yourself, you give others permission to do the same. Another powerful connection tool is curiosity. Instead of making assumptions about why someone did something or what they're feeling, ask questions. Real questions, not rhetorical ones designed to make a point. questions that show you genuinely want to understand their experience. Pay attention to people's values and what matters most to them. When you understand what someone cares deeply about, you can communicate in ways that resonate with their core concerns and motivations. Influencing through emotional intelligence. Traditional approaches to influence often rely on logic, data, and persuasion. While these have their place, emotional intelligence gives you access to a much more powerful form of influence, one based on connection, trust, and understanding. People are influenced by those they trust, and trust is built through emotional connection. When someone feels that you genuinely understand them and care about their well-being, they become much more open to your ideas and suggestions. This means influence through emotional intelligence isn't about manipulation or getting people to do what you want. It's about creating conditions where people feel safe to consider new perspectives and make changes that are genuinely in their best interest. Leading with heart. Whether you're in a formal leadership position or not, you have opportunities every day to lead through emotional intelligence. This kind of leadership isn't about having all the answers or never showing emotion. It's about creating environments where people can do their best work and be their authentic selves. Leading with heart means acknowledging the human side of every situation. Yes, we need to meet deadlines and achieve goals, but we're doing this work with human beings who have feelings, fears, hopes, and dreams. When you honor this reality, people respond with greater engagement, creativity, and loyalty. Putting it all together. As we wrap up this exploration of emotional intelligence in relationships, remember that these skills develop over time with practice. You don't need to master everything immediately. Start by paying more attention to the emotional signals around you. Practice speaking with greater intention. Approach one difficult conversation with curiosity instead of defensiveness. The beautiful thing about developing emotional intelligence is that it creates positive ripple effects. As you become more emotionally intelligent, the people around you often become more open, honest, and emotionally available as well. You're not just changing yourself, you're contributing to a more emotionally intelligent world. Your relationships are your greatest source of joy, meaning, and fulfillment in life. By developing your emotional intelligence, you're investing in not just better relationships, but a richer, more connected way of living. Remember, empathy truly is a superpower, and like any superpower, it becomes stronger the more you use it. I hope this gave you something to think about today. Dr. Julian Vance has been with you all the way. And always remember, keep learning. Keep pushing forward. Who stops reading, stops growing.